This is the second lecture where we look at Nietzsche's writing from Ecce Homo, and what we're going to do with these two lectures which remain are to split the content so that we start by talking a little bit about what the book is actually about and what Nietzsche's main intentions from it are. And then the final lecture will look at some of the bigger ideas, Nietzsche as educator. So what is the book about? Well, it's an autobiographical account of Nietzsche's writings, and what Nietzsche is trying to do with this particular book is he's trying to do a revaluation of values. He's interested in how we can reconsider the values that we have and how we can then reach our potential as individuals. So this uses Nietzsche as a reference point to look to see how we can inspire ourselves to become what we truly are. We saw in the last lecture what the title of the book really means, and this is really the underlying theme of the whole book. How can we become what we have the potential to become? So we have to ask, who is Nietzsche as far as Nietzsche is concerned? Well, Nietzsche sees himself as having opened up the question of what morality really is, and therefore the question of what we can become. And he says here, the disparity between the greatness of my task and the smallness of my contemporaries has found expression in the fact that I have been neither heard nor even so much as seen. Under these circumstances, there exists a duty against which my habit, namely to say, listen to me, for I am thus and thus. Do not, above all, confound me with what I am not. Nietzsche, therefore, wants to use this book to help us understand what he truly is and how he has come to be that way. And he wants to do this because he feels that by doing so, it will help others to become as he has become, to become all that we can be. So let's look at what Nietzsche says about himself. Now, in this particular book, he uses a lot of phrases and words which they're great clickbait. They come across as very arrogant, a little strange, but actually when we read them in context, they do actually make far more sense. So we have phrases such as, I am not a man, I am dynamite. I am a buffoon. My genius is in my nostril. A force de majeure, a destiny. And actually, when we come to look at these, we will see that they do actually make some sense. So when Nietzsche is talking about himself, he is saying that he is someone who has brought about change, that he is able to sniff out falsehoods. That's why he uses the phrase, my genius is in my nostril. He believes that he has been able to find truth in being able to see the problems with Christianity and the problems with morality, and that this gives him some authority in how to lead others. Nietzsche, despite all this, does not want us to see him as a prophet, and he's very clear on this. He doesn't want us to think that he is suggesting new things to worship or that he's trying to start any kind of new religion or religious movement. He says, the last thing I would promise would be to improve mankind. I erect no new idols. So although he is trying to talk to us about how one can be all that one can be, he isn't looking to improve mankind. He's not trying to set up anything new to worship. He doesn't want us to be seen as a prophet. He says, within my writings, my Zarathustra stands by itself. I have with this book given mankind the greatest gift it has ever been given. Here there speaks no prophet, none of those gruesome hybrids of sickness and will to power called founders of religions. So Nietzsche wants us to look to his works, but he does not want us to see him as any kind of leader or prophet. Now, Nietzsche is an immoralist, and he's very clear that this is what he sees as one of his main roles. But he says that that doesn't make him a moral monster. He is not someone who is advocating just any kind of behaviour. He says, I am not a moral monster. I am a disciple of the philosopher Dionysus. He's a satyr rather than a saint, and he's interested in the way that those instincts can guide us rather than looking to morality. So when we look at Nietzsche and philosophy, we know that Nietzsche challenges the assumptions of philosophy. We know that he is challenging Christianity and all that comes with it. And he says, reality has been deprived of its value, its meaning, its veracity to the same degree that an ideal world has been fabricated. In plain terms, the fabricated world and the reality, to the point of worshipping the inverse values to those which alone could guarantee it prosperity, future, the exalted right to a future. I do not refute ideals, I merely draw on gloves in their presence. What Nietzsche is saying here is that he sees himself as a challenger to the established philosophy. And that's what he wants us to see him as. This is the role that he doesn't just present in his earlier works, but that he wants us to see as his legacy. He has challenged what our assumptions about reality are, and he says that this should tell us who he is, that he is someone who will undermine the established order and look to create his own values, a revaluation of values. Now, in this book, Nietzsche comes back to the idea of Dionysus, who, of course, we covered in The Birth of Tragedy. Now, Nietzsche originally said that he was interested in Dionysus because he saw him as the opposition to Apollo. He sees him as embracing his instincts and really demonstrating what Western society and Western philosophy is missing. In Ecce Homo, he comes back to Dionysus and he talks about himself as being a disciple of Dionysus. And we have to ask ourselves, why does he put such importance on Dionysus? And why does he choose the god of Dionysus? Well, Dionysus he sees as being someone who embraces this life, which of course is one of the issues he has with Christianity. He argued in The Antichrist that Christianity puts its focus on the next life rather than this life. Dionysus, in contrast, really focuses on the instinct and the life of this life. And this really appeals to Nietzsche. He sees Dionysus as the antithesis to Christ. And we have a quote here from the Ansel Pearson book, which is on how to read Nietzsche, where he says, whereas the God on the cross is a curse on life and a signpost to seek redemption from it, the god Dionysus, cut to pieces, is a promise of life. So Nietzsche is interested in Dionysus and sees himself as a disciple of Dionysus because Dionysus is a promise of life, because he is engaged with this life. And that's what Nietzsche wants to see as important. Nietzsche, as we know, is massively critical of Christianity, and this comes through in Ecce Homo as well. And it's included in Ecce Homo because, of course, it's such an important element of Nietzsche's philosophy. And it's not just that he dislikes Christianity, he has a problem with religion in general. He says here, religions are the affairs of the rabble. I have need of washing my hands after contact with religious people. I do not want believers. He also has this quote where he says, I am a bringer of good tidings, such as there has never been. Now, this quote is significant because it's a reference to Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead. And whilst, of course, we know that Nietzsche was far from being the only person talking about the death of God, when he talks about being a bringer of good tidings, what he means is that he is the one who has brought us the impact of the death of God. He is the one who has told us that Christian morality is dead. And if we remember the scene in Thus Spoke Zarathustra when the tightrope walker has died or is dying, and Zarathustra says to him that he doesn't need to worry about the afterlife. He doesn't need to worry about heaven or hell. And this is what Nietzsche means when he says he is the bringer of good tidings. He is saying that we don't have to worry about the afterlife anymore. We can focus on this one. Throughout Ecce Homo, Nietzsche uses the phrase, "Have I been understood?" And it comes up again in this quote here. He says, "Have I been understood? What defines me, what sets me apart from all the rest of mankind, is that I have unmasked Christian morality. Blindness in the face of Christianity is the crime par excellence, the crime against life." So it's this point that for Nietzsche, one of his most important acts has been to unmask Christian morality, to tell us that Christian morality is no longer what we need to rule us, because we don't have to worry about the afterlife. So what does Nietzsche want from this book? Well, he's trying to focus on a revaluation of values. He's trying to encourage others to become what they can be. And as we will see in the next lecture, we will look at the idea of Nietzsche as educator, what he sees as a good educator being, and how this book fits into that role. Nietzsche says, "You have only to read this writing, breathe in the air of my writings." So he wants his work to inspire us. He wants to see it as having some practical use. He may not see himself as a prophet, but he does believe that what he is producing and the ideas within them are going to be valuable for us.